Hello everyone! Here I have all of my dice, but for the first game that I'm going to show you, you're only going to need 2. Before I start playing, I took this piece of felt that I'm going to use. I'm just going to place it underneath, just so that it softens the landing and the dice don't go everywhere. For this game called Knockout, there are 4 knockout numbers, and they are 6, 7, 8, or 9. 6 on the die will look like this, or this. A 7 on the die can look like this, or this. And this is what an 8 on the die can look like. And here's what a 9 on the die can look like. For any players start rolling, we need to pick out 2 knockout numbers. For my game, I'm going to choose 6 and 9. And I will just circle those so that I can remember which knockout numbers I chose. Then I'm just going to draw a scorecard for each player. For this game, I'm just going to show you that there's player 1 and player 2. But this game can also be played with 2 or more players. Player 1 begins by rolling their die. Then, by adding the 2 numbers on the die together, you will get your total number. If your total number is not one of your knockout numbers, then that number can count as points. I've written down 3 so that I can keep track. The next player will take their turn and then count the numbers on the die that they roll. This is 11, which is not one of our knockout numbers, so we can add it to our points. The next person will take their turn and then count their die, and if it isn't a knockout number, it can count as points. These die here equal 10, which is not a knockout number, and it can be added to my score. These 2 die equal 6, and 6 is one of our knockout numbers, which means they're knocked out. When all the players are knocked out, you can add together all of your numbers to get your final score. This next game is called Run For It, and for this one, you're going to need 6 dice. What you're going to look for when you roll your die is the number 1. You're going to need the number 1 to start your sequence. Sequences that go from 1 to 2, and 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on will count as runs or sequences. The goal is to get as many sequences or runs as you can to get as many points as you can. I've made a scorecard with players A and player B so that I can keep track. And player 1 will begin by rolling their die and then look for a sequence in the dice that they rolled. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, with an extra 4 that doesn't count in the points, so it will just be set aside. And here we have a whole sequence going from 1 to 5. And each one of these die counts as 5 points. So we need to count by 5s to get our score. 5, 10, 15, 20, and 25. Which means we will add 25 points to player A's score. Player 2 will take their turn and then look for the same sequences or runs beginning with 1. There are 2 1s and there's a 2. 1, 2 counts as one sequence or run. 1 by itself, though, does not count as a run and is set aside. 5 and 10 make 10 points for player B. And these are our scores for player A and player B. If a player does not roll any runs or sequences, their turn will be over and they can pass it on to the next player. There are no points collected for that turn. This turn only rolled a 1, which means no points, and it can be passed on to the next player for their next turn. And this turn rolled a sequence using all die, going from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Using all the die, which means 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 points for player A. This game can go for as many rounds as you'd like, and at the end of your round, you can add up all your numbers together to get your final score. This game is called Stuck in the Mud, and for this game you're only going to need 5 dice. To begin this game, player 1 will roll their die, and any die that has the number 2 or 5 on it counts as being stuck in the mud and does not get rolled again during your turn. The remaining die will be rolled again, and if their numbers are not 2 or 5, you can add them together to score your points. These 2 die here equal 10 points. So I will make a scorecard and write down the points that I get. Player 1 will continue rolling the remaining die and scoring their points. Player 1 will keep rolling until the remaining die roll a 2 or a 5. The ones that roll a 2 or a 5 will be set aside because they're stuck in the mud and they can't be rolled. Player 1 will run out of die and then pass their die to the next player. Player B will continue rolling their remaining die until they can count their points. Player B now has 3 points and will continue rolling their die until they get a 2 or a 5. And that's the end of round 1. And at the end of round 1, you can add up all your points together to get your total score. So for player A, their final score will be 10, 15, 20, and 24. Now that we've written our total score for player A, we can move on to player B, which will just be 3 because player B didn't roll any more numbers. The final score for round 1. This game can go on for 5 rounds. Enjoy your dice games, everyone, and thank you for joining me today. Bon appétit!